Hey everybody, I'm going to make a quick video tonight just to say keep going, like whatever you're going through. I've been like going through the ringer this past year. I almost feel so much gratitude for being in this position because it's been so much growth, but man, it's just like it sucked in a lot of ways too. And I guess that's how like the really sticky situations in life are, there's a lot of strength and growth and wisdom to be had, but it just sucks. And I have felt like I've just been beating my head against the wall in the proverbial sense. Because everything, like I had these expectations with my writing. Like I was like, when am I going to get published, and when am I going to get like a literary agent and all that. So I had those expectations. I had since I got sober in 2018, well, fully sober in 2019. It was a process of several months. My sobriety was, but after that journey and I turned that corner on my own, I thought I had this like fairy tale love story. I met someone and it's just like the stars aligned, and and not in the sense where I was trying to like force these pieces to fit or have it be some like egoic self-destructive narrative of Bonnie and Clyde. That was like my thing in a former life, basically from 21 till 34, or really 14 to 34 in total. I had kind of like this, like this damn the man, we're going to do it together, and it's going to be like really toxic codependency. That was like my thing. And so when I found a relationship that was healthy and worked, and it wasn't like based on like chaos that was substituting passion, that was substituting love, it felt just like, I had finally, gotten my happily ever after. And to really see that was for this time of my life. It was for a time period. And destiny doesn't mean forever. Soulmate does not mean forever. I really think, side note, the terms twin flame and soulmate, in my opinion, are incredibly overrated. And from my experience, my interpretation, like I said, 20 years of a cluster F of dating and romance and matters of the heart. Soulmate, you can feel it when you meet your soulmate. I've met a couple, and what they have meant in my life was it was someone I knew it was a soul connection, even if I didn't know it in that definition from the get-go. It was an intense like a magnetism that wasn't based on romance or attraction. It was something really deeper on a soul level, like a soul lesson that needed to be learned. I knew it, I felt it. And even if I couldn't put those pieces together, what those feelings meant until after the fact, when I had my hindsight sight, a soulmate is just a person that you have, that you're going to learn lessons with, a big life lesson. It doesn't mean forever. It doesn't mean like happily ever after. It doesn't even necessarily mean anything good. It just means something powerful, some lesson for you. But it's, for my opinion, it's experienced not without a lot of heartache. And twin flame is absolutely a crock of shit. It's not in the philosophical sense, there are twin flames, but you can't look for it. You can't take a course on finding yours. Don't even worry about it. It's like spending all of your paycheck on, Mega Millions lottery tickets, being like, yeah, this is a successful plan. If you go searching for your twin flame, you're not going to find it. And these chaotic relationships, in Hollywood, they say, oh, it's a twin flame. It seems to me like it's a soulmate relationship that is masquerading as a twin flame. Been there, done that. Believe me, I'm talking from experience. So twin flame, don't even look for it, because if you look for it, you're never going to find it. And it's just like the old adage, when you stop looking for love is when you find the one. That is, a twin flame is like the one on steroids, it's like the ultimate, the one. So yeah, don't even worry about that. But where was I going? Yeah, I thought I had like this happily ever after, and it turns out I had destiny was on a clock, and I have felt so suffocated for so long. So what to do? Keep going. tell somebody. I was so embarrassed, ashamed, defeated to speak the truth aloud to anyone. So I was carrying around for several months just this fact and this weight of like that basically my life I was living in like, the corpse of a shell of what it once was, because it was no longer what it was. And I was like leading this double life of what I knew and then like what we were still projecting, and I was still projecting. And that was because I thought like once I got sober I wouldn't have, once I met certain milestones in my life and finally got to a certain level of like, mental clarity, acceptance, internal peace, self-love, etc., I didn't think I'd have to be starting over from scratch anymore. I didn't think like those lessons where it's like, oh my God, here I am again, were something I was going to have to deal with. I thought, man, with addiction, you have plenty enough like super hard lessons learned in hard ways. And so, man, it was like a punch to the stomach. I spent several months just kind of crying quietly, finding myself like, uh, kind of busting out into tears, not like sobbing, but just like holding back tears and stuff because this like truth was eating me alive. And I was embarrassed to tell someone. And once I told my mother, who is objectively one of the most judgmental people I've ever met, but she's a good mother. So I told someone who I knew wasn't going to judge me and was going to be there. And just having her there as that person to listen, like, hey, heads up, this is what's happened. This is where we're at, was such a blessing. And I felt so much better immediately after telling somebody. So talk to someone. I got back into a therapy program, and that was another thing with being on Medicaid. The best, easiest way for me to find a therapist that is accepted through Medicaid is through a Suboxone program. I had, once again, this narrative in my mind of, okay, I was on Suboxone for a time period, and then I got on the injection, the shot. I was on that for several months, and then it weaned out of my system naturally, and I'm done with that. And I had this narrative in my mind that when I met a certain level of success within my own life, that it was going to look a certain way. And being done with medicated assisted sobriety was definitely one of those things. And anything else felt like backsliding. And then life started to happen and compile, the dissolution of my relationship, and it's just like these little tests that the universe will give you. I ran into, he knocked on my door oh so randomly after a year, maybe two. An old dealer knocked on my door and was like, oh, hey, just wanted to touch base. And by the way, things like that started happening. And so I got back into this boxing program, not because I felt like I was on the verge of relapse or anything, but just really because I wanted the therapy. And also in the back of my mind, I was like, and I have that cushion. So something else is maybe that I'm telling myself, tell someone else, talk about it, get it out, get a therapist any way you can. And also it's been helpful for me to kind of drop the expectations of what something was going to look like. And the expectation that it's not success until it looks like this way, because this way is oftentimes a ruse or a well-intentioned like mirage, or something else, maybe like indoctrination. It can be anything, and the expectations, there's like the big ones and the obvious ones from society and family and the church and the state and yada yada, the zeitgeist at large, but there's also like the expectation I placed on myself. And so I had to let it go. Like getting back into a Suboxone program, I had to look at that as, hey, that's a self-care act. I talk about autonomy and self-love. That's an act of self-love. Getting back and saying, hey, I'm doing this. I'm doing it for the therapy. And it has been like, what's the word? I don't know. It's been super helpful. But, and something else is like, man, I kept feeling like 2025 for me was like a tower moment in my life. If 2020 was a global tower moment in tarot, the tower is like, if it can crumble down, it's going to crumble down. And if it does crumble, then that means it has to, because if it couldn't crumble, it wouldn't crumble. And it's crumbling down to usher in the new, like it or not. And really now I'm coming to see, like, other people's towers do not have to be my own. And a fresh start, a clean slate, whatever you want to phrase it, is ultimately a blessing. Because you're going into that upgraded version of yourself, that new chapter of yourself, with that wisdom, with that strength, with that autonomy, and out with the old and with the new. And it wouldn't be old if it wasn't old. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents for the night. Y'all have a good one.